Hello, everybody. Happy Thursday. Evan Lazar, Alex Barth, Patriots Beat podcast. Day 8 of training camp, Alex. Day 2 of full pads for the Patriots and a rainstorm at Gillette Stadium. And you knew that Bill Belichick was smiling his way through the entire practice to see ball security, how the quarterbacks handled the ball, how the quarterbacks threw the ball, how the running backs did all those things, and receivers, and so on and so forth. This was a Patriot-like practice in the conditions out there today. As we know, in New England, you never know what the weather is going to give you. So the Patriots practiced in full pads, in a full rainstorm. I told you I wasn't going to make this joke. Making it anyways. I was surprised that you
coming out as you do, so it's kind of killing the point, but go ahead.
I was surprised that Mr. Alex Barth 98.5 guest appearance on Felger and Maz and Toucher and Rich. I had no idea if you were going to show up today, so I appreciate you coming and still playing with the not the cool kids here at the park.
No, this is. I'm very happy to be here. I did complete my Sports Hub career Grand Slam today. I'd gone on Jones. I was on Zolak and Bertrand yesterday, and then obviously Toucher and Rich and Felger and Maz today. And thank you to them for having them on. But I'll tell you this: at the end of the Felger and Maz interview, right? They asked me, "All right, which player who's going to make the roster has sucked in camp?" And it froze me up. I'll be honest, it froze me up. They caught me off guard. I didn't know what to say because that's not how we generally do things on this show. I generally try to, give reason and all that behind that. We ended up having an interesting discussion about it, but it's good. It's good to be back here for sure. You're not gonna surprise me like that. I don't think.
No, I'm not going to surprise you like that. We don't normally come on the pod and say, okay, who sucked? You know what I mean? That's not to pick on Felger and Maz by any means. They do their shtick.
They do their show. We do ours. And I think, I think that's kind of what you can't do the same show that everybody else is doing. That's not, they're not going to do the same show we are. Not that we're competing with them. We're not going to do the same show they are. Because then you only have to listen to one. We want people to listen to all of it. So if you do want to hear that, 98.5 thesportshub.com, it's up there.
There you go. There's a shameless plug. We are a glass half full kind of show. So I want to start with the quarterbacks and discuss some of the glass half full stuff. I want to get into the rep discrepancy in a minute, but I want to start with talking about what we saw on the field today from one Mac Jones, who put on a show, quite frankly, during 11-on-11s in a downpour, in a rainstorm. He was out there slinging it, really slinging it. There was one point in practice, and we can kind of break down some of these individual throws, and there was one throw in particular I really wanted to highlight where he had 3 or 4 what I would call big-time throws in a row. Right, the seam ball to Hunter Henry, the corner route to Christian Wilkerson was a nice throw. He hit N'Keal Harry in stride on a post, kind of like a skinny post or in breaker, and then N'Keal Harry broke a tackle and ran almost for a touchdown at the end of the play. They were actually tackling to the ground, live tackling on that particular play. So hitting receivers in stride, throwing with anticipation, great ball placement and zip and velocity. I mean, just the entire gamut of things that you would want to see. If you were waiting, I think Mac Jones had good practices in the past, in the first 7 practices of camp. But if you're waiting for that real pop, right, that real franchise QB, first round QB, I shouldn't call him a franchise QB yet, first round QB moment, today probably was it, especially given the fact that he was throwing in a downpour, right? Given the conditions, the rainy weather, the fact that he was able to throw through the rain and the rain didn't affect his accuracy at all, that is a really good sign, especially if you're going to play your games up in Foxborough.
Yeah. So, I mean, granted, let me just say, I wasn't at that first OTA practice, right? When everybody was like, whoa, Mac Jones, like you remember that. And that was, when he arrived. And you were there. So correct me if I'm wrong. This was the best Mac Jones has been since he got to Foxborough. This was the best day. It's not just that he was making the best throws that he's made. There were times, and I've talked about this the last couple of days, there were times where, he looked like a rookie. Things looked a little too, I don't want to say too big for him, but he was clearly still learning, how things work, the NFL process, the process of an offense at the NFL level. He was in command today. That was his offense. He had the keys. He was driving the car. And that's really what I've been waiting for with him is when was it, not just when was he going to make the throws like a number one quarterback, but when was the demeanor? When was he going to look like a number one quarterback? And he even talked about it after practice. He talked about his confidence is increasing. He talked about finding his voice at the line of scrimmage, and even just in calling out the cadences, having more command, having more confidence when he calls out the cadences. He didn't just look the part today. He acted the part. It wasn't just, in between snaps. It was during plays, between plays, in the huddle. He carried himself like an NFL quarterback today. That's what I was waiting for. That's what I think a lot of people were waiting for. I am sure that's what Bill Belichick was waiting for, and that's an exciting development.
Right. And I mentioned some of the downfield throws that he had. I think the best throw, and I had turned around and we were talking about this a little bit in the tent out at practice, the best kind of play. It wasn't even that the throw was that good, right? But the best kind of play was the second play of that 13 rep stretch that he had towards the end of practice when they really got into the competitive 11-on-11 portion of practice. And he came to the line of scrimmage, and Jawan Bentley showed him something. I would have to watch the play back on tape to really know exactly what he saw. But he saw something from Jawan Bentley that indicated that Jawan Bentley was going to blitz up the middle on the play. And he tapped his helmet. We've seen Tom Brady do this a million times, right? Alert, alert, right? He goes, alert, alert, 8. And he points right at 8, and he moves Damian Harris from his left side to his right side. The ball is snapped. Sure thing. Here comes Jawan Bentley. Damian Harris steps right up, picks up the blitz, and he throws to N'Keal Harry on a slant route coming from the other direction, in stride, out, balls out, knows the blitz is coming, throws high and hits the right read, gets the ball out, puts it right on N'Keal Harry. And N'Keal Harry, they weren't tackling live in that particular situation, but it was an opportunity to catch and run with the football if they were. Those are the types of plays where I see him make those types. I knew, and we all knew, as a first-round quarterback, all of these guys can come out in practice and make the throws, right? Like the throw to Christian Wilkerson that I think a lot of people tweeted out, it was a corner route. It was a really nice kind of drop it in the bucket kind of throw on the sideline. It was a dime, no doubt about it. But most quarterbacks that get drafted in the top 15 in the NFL draft can make that throw every once in a while in practice, right? It's the quarterback play at the line of scrimmage, the pre-snap play, of being able to tell that a blitz is coming, knowing how to get his protection to pick up that particular blitz, and then knowing where his quick answer is out of that blitz to get the ball out hot to N'Keal Harry. That's high-level quarterback play. That's the Patriots offense. That's what this is all about. That's what training camp is all about, is knowing where those answers are, knowing how to point things like that out. And that was the moment there where I said, it's starting to click for him. He's starting to get it. And you see that sort of mental sharpness that a lot of people talked about from Alabama and just in the draft process of him being super pro ready, him handling things at the line of scrimmage. And what I thought was really interesting was on Wednesday after practice, Josh McDaniels talked about Mac being louder at the line of scrimmage and kind of be more confident with his cadences. And then Mac talked about it after practice again on Thursday. Well, that was a clear moment where he was in complete command of all the moving parts, right? The protection, the read, the throw, everything. And that's exactly what you're looking for.
Yeah. And I hate to do this. I have to throw some water on the fire here. And I know you're normally the wet blanket, but I said this after Cam had his big day on Monday, Tuesday, whatever. So deep in camp, I don't know the days of the week anymore. We are like, Mac needed a big day. Don't get me wrong. Mac needed a big day. He had a big day. He was good today.
Right.
We are so freaking early in this thing.
Yeah.
And chronologically, we're halfway through. There's going to be about 16 training camp practices. We've had 8. But when you weight what different practices mean, just the second padded practice, we're going to have joint practices, which I think will tell us a ton. I'll be honest. I am going to put the majority of the weight on not just a quarterback, every position. When you do the preseason evaluations, most of my weight is going to be on the joint practices.
I actually think that Bill Belichick is right there with you.
And that's why I'm doing that, because he said that. Yeah.
He keeps on bringing up the joint practices over and over again. As I think that, not to cut you off, sorry, but I think the reason why
I cut you off enough.
I think the reason why the joint practices are so important to them is because those are still technically behind closed doors, right? Like you're not, even though there's going to be fans there and even though we're going to be there, there's limits to what we can say about the different schemes that they're running and stuff like that. When you put stuff on tape in a preseason game, the rest of the league can watch that, right? So I think Bill Belichick approaches preseason games because they are on TV as very vanilla, right? We're not going to game plan. We're not going to show any of our real wrinkles in those. Whereas in joint practices, you can probably get away a little bit more with showing some of the things that are going to be, especially if like against the Giants and the Eagles, who they're not going to play in the regular season this year.
Yeah, so just to get back to what I was saying, and that's why, like, that's a great explanation, honestly, of why I'm putting so much weight on that. But we've got 5 or 6 joint practices left. We've got 3 preseason games.
Right.
Cam Newton, I still believe, if we're just talking about week 1, is going to be the starter. I still believe, but there's so much information left we don't have. I don't, like, some people today are saying Mac put himself right next to Cam Newton for that job. I don't know about that. He certainly didn't. I think there was a chance Cam could run away with it before you got to those consequential practices. Because if Mac can't do it when things aren't consequential and Cam can, we know that, then how's he going to do it once the lights get brighter? And what Mac did today was say, okay, I'm ready for the next step. But we still have a long way to go. I am not, ready to declare a winner, anything definitive like that. There's still a long way to go. Mac had the day he needed to have for sure. But this was step 1. A lot of people are acting like this is, here we go. Mac's making his move. He's had more reps. He's turning the corner. This was step 1. This was him picking himself up off the mat. And there's still a long way to go in this.
There's still a long way to go.
Very good day. 2 good days in a row. Those joint practices can't get here soon enough.
Yeah, so we're going to get to the reps in a second because I do want to discuss this from a couple of different angles. But the one thing I want to say about that is that I, too, am firmly in the camp that thinks that Cam Newton is going to start the season as the quarterback, right? I don't think that Mac Jones is starting the season as the quarterback unless, and I'm talking about week 1 starter, unless, and I hope this doesn't happen, but unless Cam gets hurt. Right. That's really the only way that I see them throwing Mac in there right away. What we can take out of today and the positive that we can take out of today is, and out of yesterday, I would say too, and all the good things that Mac Jones has done is he looks like a quarterback he drafted in the first round. And I think is already probably pretty far ahead of where he should be. I'm not at Bears camp. I'm not at Niners camp. I'm not at Jacksonville's training camp. So I don't know what the other rookie quarterbacks and the other first round quarterbacks look like. I know Justin Fields has had a really strong camp throwing the football, but are those quarterbacks, like I said, alerting to a blitz, resetting the protection at the line of scrimmage, and then getting the ball out and making the perfect throw against that blitz? I don't know if they're at that stage yet. Mac is at that stage. So maybe Justin Fields, as we knew going into the draft, stronger arm, better athlete, all these types of things. But we're seeing why the Patriots drafted Mac Jones in the first round, why we were selling ourselves on Mac Jones as their first round pick. We're seeing that out on the field, which is great news if you're a Patriots fan. That's all you really want to see at this point of training camp.
Well, I'm going to set you up here because you brought up a great point, and where he's compared to the other quarterbacks. You had that great stat we were talking about today of not necessarily this year, but how the reps compare to a guy like Patrick Mahomes in his first year. And I'll let you give the information, but it's interesting. I don't think anybody expected Mac to get the reps he's gotten like he has the last few days. And you can look at it one of 2 ways. Either, here we go, he's the guy. They're giving him all the chances because he's the quarterback, or they feel like they know what they have in Cam. Mac Jones is more of an unknown. You only have X number of snaps you can get per day, per week, and they just need more time to evaluate Mac Jones. It's like, we're comfortable with what Cam is. He can get private work in with the wide receivers and the cornerbacks and build chemistry. We need to take this time to evaluate Mac Jones and see if and when he'll be ready. There's 2 ways to take that. I'm really going back and forth on which they are, but your stat, and I'll let you give the numbers again, I think makes that conversation that much more interesting. So
I went back and I didn't accumulate all the stats, but I was able to go back and read some stuff out of people that I trust from Patrick Mahomes' rookie camp and from Jordan Love's rookie camp with the Packers. And then I've also been monitoring a little bit Trey Lance's situation because I think that those are all comparable situations. I guess in Chicago, it's kind of comparable with Andy Dalton, but I don't know. I give Cam more respect than I give Andy Dalton. That's just me, but I feel like
absolutely. Andy Dalton. Remember that offseason? Who was it? There were three guys. It was Cam, Andy Dalton, and who was the third one? It was the third veteran.
This past offseason or two off
2020. There was a third veteran.
Jameis Winston was a free agent.
Jameis Winston was the other one.
Yeah.
And I remember it was like, Cam's interesting because he brings that new dynamic to the offense.
Right.
Jameis Winston, maybe there's upside there because Bruce Arians is a bad coach and maybe he ruined him. Andy Dalton, I would not. And the reason I'm fired up is I've seen some people make this comparison. Like what would have happened if the Patriots signed quarterback X instead of Cam in 2020? There was no reason for Andy Dalton to ever come to Foxborough. There was no reason for that. And let's be glad he didn't. As bad as some people may think things were last year, be glad Andy Dalton did not come to Foxborough.
Right. So what I found just really quickly was that Alex Smith and Patrick Mahomes' rookie camp was the clear-cut, no questions asked starting quarterback of the Kansas City Chiefs. He got the vast majority of the reps with the ones. He was repping with starters in 11-on-11. Patrick Mahomes was the clear backup scout team quarterback. Jordan Love with Aaron Rodgers, it was even more so. Right? Like it was even heavier that Aaron Rodgers was getting all those first team reps.
Well, that's also that one I put a little asterisk next to just because it was Aaron Rodgers. I think if they'd given Jordan Love too many reps, he would have left.
Right.
But yes, you're right.
That's fair. And then the other I think really good situation to sort of compare this to is what's happening right now in San Francisco with Jimmy Garoppolo and Trey Lance. And the other day, I believe it was on Tuesday, was the only first team reps that Trey Lance has taken all of training camp, and all of the Niners beat just went crazy. Like, oh my God, they're giving Trey Lance run with the starters, right? This is incredible. Like what's going on. Right. And all of those things, you look at that and you look at what they're doing in San Francisco's camp in particular, because I think that's relevant right now. You look at that and you say, that is totally different from what the Patriots are doing with Mac Jones and Cam Newton. It took Trey Lance 6-7 practices to get a rep with the ones. Mac was repping with the starters, starting offensive line, Nelson Aguilar, Kendrick Bourne, Hunter Henry, Jonnu Smith from day one. Even all the way back in minicamp, he was throwing with those guys. So it was a very different sort of, kind of way of going about it. And this is a good kind of segue into the reps discussion, because I think we can sit here and sort of break down each individual throw, but without knowing truly the progression read, without watching it back on tape, we're just kind of picking out highlights here and there throughout practice. I think what we can really sink our teeth into is not necessarily completions and completion percentage in training camp practice. I don't really care about all that, but in terms of raw reps, right? Over the last 2 days, Mac Jones has almost doubled up Cam Newton in reps, 42-24. Yesterday on Wednesday, we saw Mac Jones go through a sequence of 16 straight reps. Today, he went through a sequence of 13 straight reps. And I know a lot of people are going to want to hear about how some of Mac Jones's reps are against the scout team defense, and not all of them are against the first team defense. And that's definitely true. But it's also the case that you're not going to put Dante Hightower and Matt Judon and J.C. Jackson and Devin McCourty and all those guys out on the field for 13 consecutive reps in training camp, right? You're gonna rotate guys in. So Mac is the constant. Everybody else is sort of rotating around him. He's getting those reps. So the questions I guess that we can pose here for discussion is, one, what do you make of this, right? Do you sit here and say, because this 42-24 is what, if you go to Bucs camp, that's what Tom Brady is out-repping Blaine Gabbert by, right? That's usually what the starters' workload is like. But we're not there yet with Mac Jones. So do you see this as Mac, they feel like Cam is at a good spot and Mac needs the reps, or do you think that Mac is sort of making progress here or gaining ground, or however you want to phrase it?
See, and that's kind of what I said. I'm back and forth on both. I think the other thing is the way that this camp has gone and the way Bill Belichick has operated. Doesn't it feel like tomorrow Cam Newton could come out and throw 30 reps and Mac Jones could throw 5? And then this whole conversation's irrelevant. And it was just, hey, they gave Mac 2 days to give him 2 days. And it was a weird thing Bill Belichick did, and we'll never know why he did it. But, the rest of camp, Cam out reps Mac, 70% to 30% or whatever it is. So this goes back to what I said before. It's really important with training camp, and it's so hard to do this. And I've been guilty of this. Anybody who's covered camp has been guilty of this, because football is a what have you done for me lately sport, and you want to work with the immediate information you have. And you'll acknowledge that some practices mean more than others, but we all want to talk about that last day and say, or today, that last practice,
right?
And say, okay, that last practice, I'm going to look at that, and that's what this team's going to be this season. It's so easy to do that and to want to do that, but you just have to keep in mind, okay, we're 8 practices in. We have 8 more to go. We have different kinds of practices to go. We have training camp games to go. Not training camp, preseason games to go. Yeah. Thank you. I almost said spring training. And it's, we can sit here and analyze reps, and maybe that's the pertinent conversation to have right now. I don't necessarily think that that's wrong, but we're working with the incomplete picture, because this isn't going to be the final number. And Bill Belichick knows what the long-term plan is.
Right.
We don't know what the long-term plan is. These reps are probably part of a bigger picture that we can only see half of right now. So that's why it's so hard to answer that question, because yes, if Mac out reps Cam like this for the rest of camp, he's the guy. They're trying to get him the reps, to get him up to speed, to get him ready, because he's going to play, maybe not week 1, but he's going to start 10 plus games this year.
Right.
If it switches back tomorrow and this was just, the 2 days of Mac Jones, and that's what it goes down as, they wanted to see the kid in the rain. They, maybe they just wanted to let Cam rest his arm a little bit. They just thought these days were a good shot to give him a chance. So I know I'm totally copping out here, and I get accused of being a fence sitter all the time, and that's fine. But we don't have the full picture, so it's very hard to answer the question.
So the issue, though, that I have, and I'm going to push back on you this, because the issue that I have with saying that this means nothing and all this stuff is that all last year long, even all this off season, I kept on telling myself Cam Newton had no off-season program. He had no OTAs. He had no mini camp. He had an abbreviated training camp, not really a real training camp. He had no preseason games, and he had to get ready for his first season in a complex offense with the Patriots with very little preparation, right? That's what I kept on telling myself. Like, from a better baseline and a better foundation laid in the spring and the summer, then Cam Newton should be a much better quarterback. And we have seen at times in practice, and we're going to talk about Cam in a little bit more detail here in a second, we've seen at times in practice that Cam looks like a much better quarterback. But if the Patriots are sitting there and saying, we need to get Cam reps, we need to get him more comfortable in the offense, and everything's going to be fine with him, then why aren't they getting him the more reps? Then why isn't he throwing the football more? Because you can't say on one hand that he stunk last season because he didn't have all of this lead up, he didn't have training camp, he didn't have preseason games, and then watch Cam throw 11 passes in the training camp practice with pads and then barely play in the preseason or whatever. You know what I mean? So at some point, if you really want to make Cam better in your system and do what's best for Cam, having him get out rep double by Mac Jones is not getting him necessarily ready to start the season. So this could change, like you said. That's the big caveat, right? Next week, it could be a much different number. In 2 weeks, it could be a much different number. We just don't know that yet. But from what I've seen right now, it looks to me, and they should be, because they drafted Mac Jones in the first round. So this should be the way that it is going. But it looks to me right now that they are getting Mac Jones more ready than they are getting Cam ready for the season. And we'll see if it changes, right? We'll see if it changes.
So here's the other way that could go too. And we're really mincing words now, but I talked about how important the preseason games, the joint practices are going to be. Those are right around the corner. Preseason opener a week from today, and then from there it's pretty much joint practices there on out. Are they getting Mac ready for those practices in the preseason games, so that, because the thing is, if you don't let Mac practice and then you throw him into the preseason game, he doesn't have the reps. He's not going to be as good. You don't get a full evaluation. So is it, we're going to get Mac ready so we get a fuller evaluation of him down the road, and then that way we can split it closer down the road and get Cam ready. So that's, people are probably losing track of what I'm saying at this point. I feel like I need to draw a diagram. I feel like I'm Charlie Kelly trying to point
I'll
out
get the
Pepe
whiteboard
Sylvia.
and we can
Right.
we need to make one of those like FBI boards, with all the different. But the point,
I feel like I'm Charlie Kelly pointing out Pepe Sylvia. The point is, like, if you really, really if you're really, really looking for a reason to read into 2 days of rep totals, you're just looking for, the answer you already want. You're just looking for reason to support it. You're not letting the data dictate what you believe.
Okay, that's fair. But I guess what I come back to, and then we're going to move on from the quarterbacks, is
please, I'm dizzy from this. This means this, and this means that.
Okay, what I really feel is that you can't sit here on one hand and say that Cam wasn't comfortable in the system last season because of a lack of reps, and then not give him reps, right? Like if he needs more reps and he needs more time in the system, then he needs more reps and he needs more time in the system. And right now we are seeing them heavily favor giving those reps to Mac over Cam. So I just think that that's something that we definitely need to continue to monitor. Doubling up Mac's reps compared to Cam does not tell you that they're trying to get Cam more comfortable in the system. And I don't want to go whole body language on everybody and who knows what he's dealing with and who knows why. But Cam's press conference today seemed a little bit edgy. And he didn't have the best practice. So I think that that's probably more of it than anything else. But it's just stuff to worth monitoring, right? He just seemed a little bit. Usually he's very jubilant, very candid with his answers, long-winded with his answers, and today was not that type of day for Cam.
I agree with that. I wonder, and people are going to laugh when I say this. Bill Belichick's press conference was a little low energy this morning, and people are going to say, "Well,
we're in the grind."
Bill Belichick low energy.
We're in the grind.
You know what? We can read into the body language, and that's totally fair. I think that it was, hey, we're going to have to go stand out in the rain for 3.5 hours. I don't think anybody was looking forward to that. I think it was just kind of one of those days that you want to get through and you want to get over and you want to go home and shower and, put on your pajamas. And, if that becomes a theme with Cam, it's certainly something to keep an eye on, because you're right. He didn't seem like his usual self today, but I am willing, I'll give him the benefit of the doubt. I'll say sit out in the rain all day. He kind of had to stand around because, again, Mac Jones was doing so much. If he talks next week, and I think it's supposed to be beautiful next week, if he talks next week after having 30 reps and it's sunny and 85 and he still seems kind of down, then we can maybe dive into a little bit more, because then it's a pattern.
Okay, that's a solid 30 minutes on the quarterback. So we can move on to the rest of the team. There is other players on the team besides Cam and Mac Jones, believe it or not. Sometimes I don't think there are sometimes, but yes. So I wanted to talk about the trenches, because I think that once we get to these, we have a ton of information that we've shared about the receivers, about the tight ends, about the defensive backs, because of all these non-padded practices. So I wanted to talk about the trenches, the offensive linemen and the defensive linemen. I had a few guys that I thought stood out. Alex, I was going to open it up for you to share a few guys that stood out, but I wanted to start with Isaiah Wynn, who just looks fantastic. And I think the biggest thing that I see with Isaiah Wynn is that his game continues to grow stronger and stronger. He was out there today, and one-on-ones, nobody even came close to beating him in one-on-ones. He absolutely stonewalled Dietrich Wise on one of them. I think it was maybe even the first rep of the second session of one-on-ones for the offensive lineman, defensive lineman. He just absolutely closed the door on Dietrich Wise. Him and Michael Onwenu next to each other has been a terrific duo. I would say they've shown out more in camp so far than the right side, Brown and Shaq Mason have. And Isaiah Wynn looks fantastic. We know the Patriots picked up that 5th-year option on him, so he'll be on the team next year. Health is always going to be the question mark with him, but I really feel like if he can stay healthy this year, that he is kind of trending towards a breakout season where we start talking about him as a top tier, upper echelon left tackle in the NFL, because he looks like he is ready to go already and is moving extremely well out there.
Yeah, I don't know that anybody's ever doubted Isaiah Wynn's ability. It's going to come down to, can he stay healthy? Here I go copying out again, kind of putting why am I the wet blanket all of a sudden?
I don't know.
He's looked great. You're right. He's looked great. If he can stay healthy, I think he's going to have a great year. And that, picking up his 5th-year option looks brilliant. He's got to stay healthy. I will say this: he does look a little bit bigger, and that's muscular. Like he didn't just eat cakes all off season.
Right.
He's small. He's not a small guy by any means, but he's probably a smaller guy at the position than you usually see.
Oh yeah, no, he's definitely. He doesn't have the length or the size for a typical left tackle, for sure.
Right. And even compared to because, there's two kinds of left tackles. There's the Trent Brown, just big, massive people mover. And then there are, smaller tackles. But even those smaller tackles, it's generally smaller in terms of weight, not height. They're guys like, I don't know why, but Andres Pete is the one who always comes to mind. Or a much better example that Patriots fans would know. Nate Solder. Nate Solder's a converted tight end. I think was he even 300 pounds? He might have been like 298 at the end.
I think they listed him at like 310. The other comparison, just from like a pure arm length and height standpoint, Matt Light was like roughly in Isaiah Wynn's cat. Matt Light was,
but Matt Light was like Isaiah Wynn, even for the lighter tackles, he's short.
Yeah,
like he
was a couple inches taller. Matt Light was a couple inches taller, but I think they have almost identical arm length. And that was the big thing coming out with Isaiah Wynn, is that he was very, very undersized for a tackle in the NFL. That's why a lot of people thought that he was going to move inside the guard. Short arms, stocky build, doesn't have a tackle build, but he's got great feet. So he really makes up for it with his foot speed, and he's a really, really smart offensive lineman as well. So he's able to kind of make those things up.
Well, so to go back to what I was saying, like Isaiah Wynn's small for tackling. I've always wondered if that had to do with his durability issues. And he puts the weight on, which will help. But anytime a guy puts weight on, there's the risk of, okay, how does that affect his mobility? How does that affect his stamina? Like you said, he doesn't look like he's missed a beat. If anything, he's gotten better technically.
Yeah.
So, okay, he puts the weight on. He still has his technical ability. That's very encouraging because, again, if he can stay healthy, he's going to be one of the better offensive tackles in football, I think. And being able to put weight on without losing your technique is not an easy thing to do. It's screwed up many an athlete in many a sport, right? CC Sabathia is the guy I always think of. He was pitching at close to 300 pounds, took the weight off, sucked, had to put the weight back on, and then he got good again because you learn to play with the certain center of gravity and the certain body type, and you lose it. And in some sense, you have to relearn the game. Early on, it looks like Isaiah Wynn, despite putting that weight on, he's still rock solid. And that's exciting. That's encouraging.
Yeah, just great feet, great posture in his pass rush.
I was just going to say, did you think we talked about CC Sabathia today?
No, I did not. Great feet, great posture, great pad level, great hand usage, great grip strength. I mean, just a really technically sound offensive lineman. That's what they drafted, right? They didn't draft Trent Brown. They didn't draft a 6'6", 6'7" guy that's 380 pounds. They drafted a technician. Isaiah Wynn is definitely a technician. Michael Onwenu also is, maybe I would say, based off my eyes, the best offensive lineman in camp so far. He did not lose a single rep in one-on-ones. He clears the way in the running game consistently. He is just hitting the ground running from his rookie season. He said we gave him a C, right? Himself a C last year as a rookie, I think it was the letter grade, and that was just ridiculous. Yeah. But regardless of that, he's going. Go ahead. No, he looks great too. That's all I was going to say.
Between him giving himself a C and Kyle Duggar saying he was below average last year, I don't know what they're doing to these guys.
Yeah.
But I'll say this. If Michael Onwenu says he got a C, maybe that was a C. He would know better than us. We all thought he looked good, but maybe he was a C. And if that's a C, I can't wait to see what it is. Before we move on, Evan, because I think that was it for the offensive line, right?
I did want to mention David Andrews absolutely pancaked Nick Thurman. Poor Nick Thurman has a family, and David Andrews pancaked him into the ground, then stood over him for like an extra beat or two, and then walked away back into the huddle. It was great. It was a good moment.
He had a couple because he pancaked, might have been yesterday. He pancaked Henry Anderson recently. I don't remember if it was today or yesterday, but he's piling those up. The reason I brought that up is before we move on, do you want to do 30 seconds on Yodny Kajust? Somebody asked about Yodny Kajust.
It's been a rough start to camp for Yodny Kajust, but I will say that this is the first time that he has been in pads, in contact, I think in 2 years. So that obviously, obviously he was going to be slower to build up than a lot of players. Justin Herron has looked pretty good, and I think that's kind of safe to say that he's sort of your fourth tackle, assuming Onwenu's kind of the third tackle, right? If they get an injury to Wynn or Brown, then Onwenu's kicking outside. I think we can all see that. So Justin Herron is really the depth tackle on the team. Corey Cunningham and Yadni Kajust, RJ Prince, forget about it. He's not making the roster. But Yadni Kajust and Corey Cunningham have had a rough start to camp. So I talked about this the other day that I sort of felt like, behind Herron, I guess if you want to count on Onwenu as a reserve tackle as well, the 5th, 6th, 7th, those guys that's it really drops off. And I don't think this is a Patriots problem. I think this is an NFL problem. The depth along offensive lines across the league has just sort of completely deteriorated across the board. And having two good starting tackles is hard enough. Having 3 or 4 good tackles is almost next to impossible.
Yeah, and I mean that I actually agree with you. I hadn't thought about that, but you're probably right. There has been a little bit of less of an influx of talent. It happens. We're coming out of a cycle, I think, where that was true at the cornerback position.
Yeah,
it's starting to increase a little more now.
A lot about the rules and the way that these practices are set up, and the lack of pads and the lack of real development for offensive linemen in the NFL, because there's just not enough reps to go around in pads to really build up some of these guys. Like a guy like Yadni Kajust really needed some sort of a development program. He needed like a spring league or something like that to get some live reps. I think that players like that might have a better chance of at least becoming good backups in the NFL if there was just more reps to go around, but there just isn't.
Yeah, I mean, some of it too is it's cyclical. You go through periods where certain positions, sometimes you go through periods where there's just a ton of good players at a position, and it devalues the position because there's an excess of good players. We might be in one of those, honestly, right now with wide receivers, but
the wide receivers are crazy.
But tackle's kind of one right now. I think we're coming out of a cycle where the last 5 or 6 years, I'm not saying that there were no good corners, but the number of elite corners was probably a little bit lower than it had been for the previous 7 or 8 year span. We even went through a spell with quarterbacks there. What was it? There were like 4 or 5 years in a row.
Oh yeah.
Well, none of the first round quarterbacks got a second deal with their team.
The early 2010s with like the Blaine Gabberts and the Jake Walkers. And that was a really tough period of time.
It's funny you brought that up, because I think about that, how that works from time to time. We're like, we just assume that, okay, because there's 32 teams, there's 32 starting quarterbacks, there's 32 number 1 corners, there's 32 left tackles, et cetera. And that's not always the case. I truly believe this. There's less than 32 people on the planet who can play quarterback at the NFL level. And when there's 32 teams, that creates an interesting dynamic. And I don't know, at least in our lifetime, in recent memory, I don't know that we've been through an offensive line shortage, certainly not a tackle shortage. I think there was a center shortage in the early 2000s, but I don't know that we've ever been through an offensive line shortage. And that could look, I know this is big picture. We're trying to talk about camp, but I am actually really curious what you think about this. We could be headed for an offensive line shortage. And if that's the case, with defensive fronts as good as they are right now, it could be really interesting for a league that for the last 5 or 6 years has trended heavily offense and heavily towards the passing game. It could change the NFL a little bit.
Yeah, it's really an issue, and I know that guys like that know way more about offensive line play than I do, like Duke Manyweather or Josh Schwartz and people like that have really been behind O-line masterminds. I don't know if you know what that is, Alex, but it happens every offseason. All the big-time offensive linemen, both college and NFL guys, they all get together at a summit, and they just talk O-line play, right? Techniques, different things, different training methods, and they've really tried to help just help the O-line community in both the NFL and then the up-and-comers in college. Like, for example, I know not this past year, but I don't remember exactly who was there this past year out of college, but the year before that, guys like Creed Humphrey, for example, was at O-line masterminds as a college guy, and guys that were going to be top players. So the O-line community, I feel like, is recognizing that the NFL is not doing enough on its own to develop these guys. They're not giving them enough live reps. They're not giving them enough contact reps. They're not giving them enough time in the facility and on the practice field. Because offensive line play, and Carmen Brasillo talked about this. Dante Scanecchia talks about it all the time. It's all about fundamentals, right? And the only way to get better at fundamentals is consistently drill them time in and time out. And if you're not drilling them in pads and you're not actually making contact with anybody or anything, it's really difficult to really sharpen the iron there. So that I think that they're trying from an outside perspective to get better there, but it is definitely something that a lot of people are paying attention to. All right, let's get back to the camp stuff though. Let's talk about the defensive line, pass rush guys and one-on-ones and things like that. I did want to talk about Carl Davis, who I think I had him down for 4 wins in one-on-ones, which is very impressive. And he's somebody that also had pretty solid tape last year. And he only played 3 games for the Patriots. He got hurt right away, but he put together some pretty good tape in those 3 games and had some good moments. He's had some good reps in one-on-ones. He was pretty good in that inside 6 drill that they were doing early on in practice when they were doing that run game stuff. And we can talk a little bit about that more in a second as well. But Carl Davis, it was what, if we're going to get into the sleepers, right? Guy, Godshaw, Wise, Barmore wasn't out there today, but we're getting into some guys on the bubble that might potentially be able to make the roster. Carl Davis is one player that I think has had a nice camp and has a chance here.
Yeah, he's certainly popped up a couple times, and he's a guy that I thought played well last year when he did. He had some concussion issues.
He was the best nose tackle that they had last year, I would say.
But he played like 3 games because they claimed him halfway through the season.
Yeah,
then he had COVID. Games. He had COVID, and then he had like 2 or 3 concussions. There might have been a foot injury in there too. So he was a good player last year. I was excited when they brought him back. I do think they brought him back with a purpose. I don't think he was just the camp body they were bringing back. It's it's tough because that position looks like it's going to be so stacked. With Devon Godshaw has been quietly, I think, one of the best defensive players in camp. Christian Barmore, it's been one practice because he didn't practice today. So, I don't want to say that he's been great, but that one practice was unbelievable. He might have been the best player on the field. And then you still have Lawrence Guy, who, they just paid, and he's going to factor in there as well. So is Carl Davis going to be one of the 53 best players on the team? Yeah, I think that there's a chance he could be. Does he make the 53-man roster? It's, are you going to, kind of like we've talked about with N'Keal Harry, are you going to keep a 5th or a 6th wide receiver in a 12 personnel offense? The numbers just don't dictate that. Are you going to keep 4 defensive tackles? Sorry. Are you going to keep 4 defensive tackles in a 3-4 defense? The numbers don't exactly dictate that either. So I'd like to see him stick. He's a good player, but does that roster spot, if he's a wash with a guy like Rashad Berry, who's been great to start camp and had another good day today, would you rather keep the extra linebacker when you're going to play more linebackers than defensive tackles?
Yeah, so I was going to bring up Rashad Berry in a second. I like Carl Davis' skill set. These guys 6'6". He's 320 pounds. He's huge. He's a big guy, right? And he's got good athleticism and what I would call lateral mobility, right? The ability to move side to side quickly, which is a lot better at that position is what's most important, right? You're not running a 40 as a defensive tackle in the NFL. So how you move side to side, I think, is really important. And if you can shift and change gears, is very important. He has looked good. I wanted to bring up Rashad Berry because you keep on pointing out Rashad Berry to me. I keep on dismissing you. Maybe I should stop doing that. Today, RJ Prince has had a really rough camp. He's not going to make the Patriots roster, but Rashad Berry had a clean, decisive win against him today in one-on-ones. It was speed to power. And that was the one thing that watching Rashad Berry in college, it was Ohio State, right? I'm blanking, but I think it was Ohio State.
Yes, Ohio State.
So Rashad Berry repped at Ohio State at both linebacker and tight end. The Patriots brought him in as sort of a we'll figure it out type of player as a UDFA. Whenever he played linebacker and rushed the passer at Ohio State, speed to power was his go-to move, and it really popped. It has really popped so far in camp as well. He's got a very nice kind of first step and ability to get low and blow guys off the ball and backwards. did it today to RJ Prince pretty decisively in one-on-ones. So he's somebody who's having a nice camp. Alex, you pointed out that he's been involved a lot with the special teams guys as well, working with Slater and that group during positional drills. So he's somebody, and especially if a guy like Chase Winovich is on PUP to start the season, he's definitely somebody that could be involved here.
Yeah, I certainly think so. And Terez Hall's another guy who's on PUP who maybe opens up a spot for Berry. You know, I keep saying I want to put stock in who's working with the special teams, and you should. We absolutely should. People should do that. But not everybody works with the special teams is going to make the team. So you do kind of have to sift through it. And Rashad Berry's been good on defense too. And that's the differentiator. He looks like he might have some upside as a situational pass rusher. I don't know that he gets there this year. You know, I'm not taking snaps away from Matthew Judon to put him in the game. I'm not taking snaps away from Josh Uche to put Rashad Berry in the game. But sometimes guys take 3 or 4 years to really reach their potential. And he's a guy that, you know, I think deserves a longer look. I think deserves a longer look than just 3 weeks of training camp. And if he keeps performing this way and he shows up in the joint practices and the preseason games, he's not going to make it to the practice squad. If he comes out and he's playing shot out of a cannon like he has so far in camp, somebody's going to claim him and put him on their 53. Some team's going to be thin at linebacker and think that, you know, this guy can play special teams. He has upside. Let's grab him. So it's a tough decision. And sometimes you have to cut those guys. Austin Carr is the ultimate one. Austin Carr did enough to make the Patriots 53-man roster whenever, what was that, 17? Whenever that was. Austin Carr did enough to make the team that year. There was too much depth ahead of him, and he just wasn't quite ready yet to make an impact, and they couldn't get him to the practice squad. So that happens, but Rashad Berry is doing what he needs to do right now.
Yeah, and the other guy that I'll quickly mention, I know that the people want to hear about the rookies in particular. Yeah. Ronnie Perkins has had some good moments the last couple of practices, I would say. And again, I think a lot of this has to be taken with a grain of salt with Ronnie Perkins because he is going up against that backup tackle crew of guys like RJ Prince, Corey Cunningham, Yadni Kajus. Those guys are having a lot of trouble with some of these guys that they're putting up against on the other side of the ball. But I have seen Ronnie Perkins pop a few times. I think that's good news for the Patriots as we move forward here. He's been working with the outside linebackers as well. So there's another one of those guys at that spot, at that edge outside linebacker, stand-up pass rusher kind of position. So there's a lot of bodies there. It's going to be tough to get through all of those guys. If I'm Chase Winovich, I'm definitely getting back on the field ASAP. If you want to be a Patriot, and obviously he's not going to get cut, but a trade or a candidate to remain on PUP, all those types of things. So is there anybody else in the offensive? I think we pretty much just went through the whole roster and mentioned at least everybody at one time, which is what the goal was.
I do want to say about Ronnie Perkins. His best moment, not that he hasn't had good moments on the field, but his best moment, I think, was on Twitter yesterday. And I talked to Jerry Thornton about this on the 98.5 The Sports Hub Patriots Training Camp Recap podcast, working on a shorter name, to see, I think guys who, I think guys who come in and truly embrace the Patriot way. I know that sounds cheesy, but guys who do that tend to work out more so than the guys who don't. And he tweeted a picture of himself talking to Teddy Bruschi. The caption was something about like, I'm standing on the shoulders of giants or something. And it wasn't just, posting to social media for clout. He was standing on the field talking to Teddy Bruschi for 5-10 minutes. You could see them working through like technique or something. And that stands out to me. If he's going to take something from Teddy Bruschi and add it to his toolbox, that's noteworthy. That we'll see if he can actually do it and make it work on the field. But he now has that. He now has that in his toolbox. That stands out to me. So if you're somebody who's, an Oklahoma fan, whatever, you're rooting for Ronnie Perkins to make the team, that's a moment you can point to and say, he's doing what he needs to do. And I feel like I've used that phrase a ton this last week. So, he's doing what he needs to do.
Yeah.
The joint practices in the preseason games decide. I'm a broken record. The joint practices in the preseason games decide a lot of this. To me, these practices here, and Bill's talked about this, these practices are almost prepped for that. They're getting you prepared for the joint practices. They're getting you prepared for the preseason. So I don't know, head to head in a position battle, how much ground a guy how much ground a guy can gain in this setting. But what he can do is build that base and build that foundation so he can gain ground when it matters once you get to those joint practices. So I look at Ronnie Perkins, both the tweet and everything he's done on the field. I don't know that he's shot himself up the depth chart, but he's done everything he needs to do to put himself in a position to move himself up the depth chart once you get into those joint practices. So that's where I look at Ronnie Perkins right now. He's a guy that's building a strong foundation. That's what you want the rookies to do. And to me, he's done that to this point.
Yeah, I agree with all that. And the other guy that I wanted to mention before we sign off here is Jonnu Smith, who I just thought had a really great practice today, doing everything that as advertised with Jonnu Smith, right? Blocking, catching the ball at all three levels of the defense, moving around the formation. And I mentioned that inside six drill, which is basically just the 5 offensive linemen plus the tight end against 6 guys on the defense front, right? So it's basically like an inverse of 7-on-7. And in that drill, you get really competitive, hard-nosed run game actions. And Jonnu Smith, on one of the first reps of the practice, actually competitive reps, he took Josh Uche and he just threw him right out the club. That's what I tweeted, right? He walked him right into the parking lot. It was just textbook feet, then hands, pad level down, and just get him and go. And it was such a good rep by John. It also opened up a tractor trailer sized hole on the left side for Damian Harris to run through. But it was such a good rep that even Josh Uche was clapping his hands. Like, good job. Like, you got me. Good job. Great rep. Later on in practice, he said he caught a pass along the sideline with Kyle Duggar, which was probably Cam's best throw of the practice. Laid it out there nicely for him on the sideline, reached outside his body, plucked it. We've seen his catch and run skills a bunch of times, whether it's passes coming sort of at motion or out of the backfield, kind of like a screen, or shallow crossers across the middle of the field. He's done a little bit of everything. He blocks his butt off. He's going to be a really good player for the Patriots. And today we kind of saw all of it come together, I would say.
Yeah, I'd agree with that. I think you hit it. I will say, I will bring up another point because you said, is there anybody else we should touch on? Somebody mentioned it in the chat, the run game. We talked the other day, it would have been Tuesday, that Ramondre Stevenson hit Miles Bryant, which is a heck of a truck stick. Right?
Yeah, he got him back.
Miles Bryant got him back today. Got him back twice.
He
stuck him twice. And Miles Bryant's not a huge guy. What you had the numbers, like, is 60 pounds on him, right?
50 pounds. Yeah, 48 to be exact.
48 pounds and
based
probably
on
about
combine measurements.
Right,
yeah,
and probably about 3 inches too. And Miles Bryant stuck him. And to play safety in New England, even if you're going to be that deep safety, you've got to be willing to come up and hit. You have to show you're willing to step up in the run game. And Miles Bryant, a smaller guy, a former cornerback, is somebody who, you know, you can question that because that's never been his game. That's never something he's needed to do. What's he going to look like doing that? Message received. He's willing to come up and hit. So that's a big, I thought that was a really good moment for Miles Bryant. He's had a good camp overall, but that was a really good moment for Miles Bryant today.
He's in really good moments. He got him twice. Really interesting spot. I think Miles Bryant is a player that I want to continue to watch. Unfortunately, sometimes, and we talked about this, I think, the other day, maybe it was off the show, but the forest through the trees, right? You got to look at the forest. Right. The forest is the quarterback competition and what's happening at the top of the roster. But the trees are guys like Miles Bryant, who right now is in team drills repping mostly with the scout team defense because the starting defense has Jonathan Jones, Jalen Mills, Kyle Duggar, Adrian Phillips, all these players that are those sort of hybrid safety slot corner type of guys. So those guys are going to play over the slot and cover receivers, or they're going to cover tight ends. That's kind of Miles Bryant's role. So I kind of I'm hoping that Miles Bryant is not going to be one of these odd men out just from a pure numbers standpoint because of all these other guys that they have on the team, because he's a good football player and he's going to play in the league for a while, I think. But when you look at sort of the depth in front of him, he's had a tough time even in training camp, I would say, to get reps with the ones because of the 4 guys that I just mentioned: Jones, Duggar, Phillips, and Jalen Mills. Those guys all kind of overlap a little bit. Is there enough room on the roster for 5 of them, right? And I guess it kind of depends on how Bill Belichick views guys like Miles Bryant and guys like Jalen? Are those safeties? Are they corners? Are they DBs? How do you kind of make that number game work? But I have noticed that Miles Bryant, who's had a nice camp, like you said, and had some good moments, has really been repping mostly with the scout team defense.
Yeah, and that could be something too, like you said, it's the numbers. Are there enough reps for him? But
right.
He can only do with what he's given. He can't just run out there when the first team defense is out there and start playing and be the 12th guy on defense. And I think there is an understanding of that. I think some people look at camp and hear a guy's on the second team or is on the scout team, and it's just, oh, that's where he is. That's what it is. I think that there's a recognition from the coaching staff that, yeah, this guy was on the scout team, but look, he played incredibly well. And we'll see, down the road, you'd like to think that they reward him with some more first team or second team reps. And I think they will. He's played like he should get those reps. But if not, I don't think that they'll totally write him off. You do have to consider competition. You do. But that doesn't mean you totally have to write off what somebody does because of the competition either. Reps against the scout team, you can still learn something from that. You don't just throw them out.
Oh, yeah, for sure. And he's gone up against Gunnar Olszewski a few times, and they've had some really good battles inside, which is nice to see. Some people in the chat asking about Trey Nixon. We talked about Trey Nixon a little bit yesterday, right? Or I don't know. These days are starting to meld together on me. I think it was yesterday, talking about him playing more as kind of that, shifty slot receiver type than necessarily a vertical guy on the outside. So that's something to look for with Trey Nixon. Jakob Johnson, our Germany fans. I'm just going through some of the players that maybe we didn't hit on. We can do a show at some point where we just allow you guys to rapid fire put names in the chat, and we'll just rattle off our takes on every single player that you guys want to talk about. I thought it would be a bigger Jakob Johnson day today. Not a huge Jakob Johnson day, but he's definitely not done anything to lose his job or anything like that, or it's really going to come down to sort of a numbers thing, I would say, with him, and a stylistic thing more so what I should say. Tomorrow night, Alex, in stadium practice, 6:00.
Special teams. That's what we need to talk about from today's practice. Can I have a minute here?
Because Nick Folk was not at practice.
We got our first extended look at Quinn Nordin.
What'd you think?
6 for 8. He did clank one in. He had a kick blocked by Matthew Judon, which, by the way, Matthew Judon with the kick block, have a camp.
Nice.
Matthew Judon, he's been excellent. I wasn't wowed. We know what the leg power is, and it was on display, but the accuracy's got to come along. That being said, he's getting better. I think he's getting better. He was really all over the place when camp started and in the spring, and now, it either goes through or it doesn't. Close only counts in horseshoes. But he is reining it in a little bit, and that's encouraging. So, we'll see tomorrow. We'll see if Nick Folk's back tomorrow, whatever the case may be. But we're going to get I think, our best look at Nordin. We had a good look at Nordin today. We're going to get our best look at him so far tomorrow.
Yes. So tomorrow night, season ticket holders, Foxborough residents, I'm pretty sure that's still what it is, even in these COVID times.
And then general public on Tuesday.
Yeah. So we're going to have 2 more in-stadium practices. Alex and I will be back on the show probably either on Saturday or Sunday, I would say. Definitely Monday at the latest, to break down what we see. The Patriots schedule, just to lay it out for you guys. Friday, tomorrow night's in-stadium practice. Sunday, Monday, Tuesday of next week are more practices down at Gillette. Tuesday, as Alex mentioned, I think is another in-stadium one. And then the preseason game, first preseason game against the Washington football team a week from tonight. I can't believe it. That's actually right around the corner. So we will have you completely covered here on Patriots Beat. We're going to keep doing these shows after practice pretty much every single day around this time, 4:30, 5 o'clock. Basically, whenever Alex and I get home from Gillette is when we usually go on the air. So between 4:30 and 5 o'clock, you can come and check that out. Probably Sunday, probably Monday, probably Tuesday, and we'll lead you all the way through until the regular season and beyond. So thanks so much for watching, everybody. We'll be back shortly. We don't know exactly when. We got to figure that out. But I'm
still going to try to make you do a show tomorrow night.
I know you are. Well, maybe we will. Maybe we'll
I'm just saying, last time you didn't want to do a show, we did it, and it had great numbers.
That's fair.
Like, nobody's going to watch on Sunday. And we had a bunch of people who watched live for the first time, which is awesome.
That's true. we really do appreciate everybody that is watching and continues to watch, and the people that participate in the chat and all those things. So we will be back this weekend. Let's put it that way. We'll be back this weekend to break down tomorrow night's practice, to break down Sunday's practice and beyond, and then preseason games, joint practices. Keep it right here, Patriots Beat Podcast. For Alex Barth and Evan Lazar, thanks for watching, everybody.